Now, the late American photographer Richard Avedon was famous for his black and white portraits that captured some of the best-known faces of the 20th century. Some of his work is now on display at the Ian Potter Museum of Art in Melbourne. The exhibition includes portraits of Marilyn Monroe, Bob Dylan, that wonderful portrait of Elizabeth Taylor that we'll see in a moment, and it also celebrates the faces of ordinary people too. Paris-based scholar Abigail Solomon-Godot is also in Melbourne this week to give a talk about the exhibition, and she joins us now to discuss the life and times of Richard Avedon. Abigail, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us today. Let's have a look at some of the images as we talk, because of course the moment people see more of them, Abigail, they'll immediately recall them. He famously said words to the effect of, my work doesn't go beneath the surface. He says there's always a hell of a lot to be seen on the surface. There are the details on the surface that you can pay attention to. I have great faith in surfaces, he said, which is an interesting philosophy.
Well, for somebody who does fashion photography, and which was effectively his day job, I mean, that's what supported what he considered to be his artistic production.
Yeah.
Is about surfaces. What could be more about surfaces than fashion photography, where even when it appears to be most spontaneous, models leaping, running, jumping, everything is choreographed, everything is precisely about the perfection of surface. And one of the things that I think is very interesting, given what I'm calling the day job as a fashion photographer, is that when he embarked upon really his career-long work in portraiture, the perfection of the surface was exactly what he repudiated, even though there was still the perfection of the print and the perfection of the presentation and the perfection of the scale and so forth. So this notion of surface is really interesting because it does link in a very profound way the work of fashion, glamour, allure, the illusion of with aha.
Yeah. I mean, she just happened to find herself in front of two elephants, did she?
That's right. Yeah. Just walking around in Paris, there were the two elephants.
Stop there and I'll take your photograph. One of his most famous pieces from Harper's Bazaar. That's so interesting, that paradox that you describe, because, yes, you're right. There's the full-on frontal portrait, warts and all, of ordinary Americans or glamorous people. Incredibly simple white background, but as you say, and we'll get to the construction of that in a moment, but as you say, the actual process itself really preoccupied him, trying to find the right kind of paper that would work for him, the right sort of printing process, the right dimension, and he made oversized prints of those work as well. So that process he was exacting about, wasn't he?
But he was exacting in all aspects of his work, and as soon as he was in a position to really control what he did, how he did it, and so on, he did. And that is extraordinarily rare for people who work for, at that time, magazines, various clients.
Because they're your master.
Yeah.
They're dictating what they want for their magazine.
But that's why he had this really unprecedented degree of freedom, certainly by the time he became the first and only official New Yorker photographer.
And that's where many of our viewers, I'm sure, will be familiar with his work, those beautiful black and white portraits that he took for the New Yorker. And there simply wasn't a feature article that appeared there on a person that didn't have an Avedon portrait. Let's go back. I've always wanted to know what the origin was of those two distinct elements of his portraits. The white background, just the perfectly simple white, which I know he played with from time to time, but also leaving in the black frame of the contact print. Now, like most great inventions, was that accident originally rather than design?
You know, I don't really know if it originally happened as accident, but Richard Avedon was not a photographer who embraced accident particularly, but it became a kind of it indicated that you had made no crop to the frame.
So
showing the black edges meant this has not been manipulated. This is the entire frame of the exposure. And of course, it quickly got picked up by other photographers as a statement of the non-manipulation, which of course is a fiction itself, because even working on the white background itself or eliminating any shadow that might have spoiled it was, of course, about manipulation.
I understand that when he was with someone and photographing them, maybe not everyone, but with some of his sitters, if he wanted to try and elicit a more telling and interesting response, he would talk to them, he would ask them questions, he would perhaps ask them rather psychologically probing or even prying questions in order to get some sort of response from them.
Well, the classic anecdote that's given about how he would contrive to get a facial expression that he wanted was that when the Duke and Duchess of Windsor were his sitters, and whatever it was they were projecting beforehand, at a certain point he started talking about how his taxi had run over a dog. And of course, since they were dog lovers, he got this expression of dismay. Entirely fabricated story.
But photography is truth. Let's not forget that, shall we?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it worked nicely for him. It's been interesting to see the selection of works that have come out as part of this exhibition. I know the Avedon Foundation that manages the estate so very, very carefully controls the works because, like a lot of high-profile photographic artists, theft and also breach of copyright and copying goes on all the time with photographers like this. That must be a very difficult thing to deal with for them.
Well, it certainly makes it difficult when you want to reproduce works of from the Avedon estate because, of course, you need permission, and of course, permission is charged. And in fact, one of the difficulties with academic publishing when you do a book for a university press, and this is not just the case with the Avedon studio, is that this is also the case with museums. You have to pay really very, sometimes prohibitive fees for the right, for reproduction rights. So, I mean, not every photographer's estate is in a position to be able to monitor all the reproductions, all the uses, whether it's been cropped and so on. But certainly this is also the case with the Arbus estate that's able to control reproduction in the same way the Avedon estate can.
It's interesting, and I often wonder what those artists, Richard Avedon, Diane Arbus and others, would make of the fact that we have now this new culture and this new digital technology and communication where any image can be colonised, if you like, by any person and sent anywhere. I wonder if Richard Avedon would have embraced that or if he would have resisted that.
It's hard to tell because the advent of digitalization is what I call, and I hate to use such academic terminology, but a kind of epistemological break with analog photography.
Yes,
in other words, the difference
is
so profound that it's very hard to sort of say, well, what would so-and-so have thought about the advent of digitalization? The one thing I feel confident he would not have made a fuss about is manipulating the image, because despite, the use of the frame, to make a kind of image that is not a kind of dumb photograph is always about manipulation.
We know that for truth. Abigail, really great to meet you today. Thanks so much.
You.
And commend the exhibition to those who might be able to get to Melbourne to see it. Thanks so much.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.